A title: Understanding and Addressing Victims' Reluctance and Concerns About Participating in the Criminal Justice System. A disclaimer: the opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Justice. This project was supported by the U.S. Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative and the Office on Violence Against Women. Portions of this program are protected by copyright. If you would like to copy, display in a public setting, adapt, or distribute this program, please contact elder.justice@usdoj.gov.
And I understand from talking to prosecutors and law enforcement officers that elder abuse victims are often reluctant to ask for help, to come to court, to talk to prosecutors. Why might that be?
Ricker Hamilton, Deputy Commissioner, Maine Department of Health and Human Services.
I'd say it's the same as all of us are reluctant to go to court and talk to law enforcement and prosecutors. I think all of us are concerned of the things that we say, what's going to happen after we say them, and even more so for older victims. And I think that would be one piece of advice that I'd give to any of us dealing with older people, is to let them know, anyone, but especially older victims. So what's going to happen with the stuff you tell me? What's confidential? What's not? What am I going to do with the information? So older victims are no different than any other victims that we deal with. They're traumatized. It's the unknown that scares all of us. And for older people, if I tell you something, am I going to have to live someplace else? Am I going to lose my independence? So I would say just come from the older victim's point of view, anticipate that they're scared, anticipate that they're confused, and anticipate that the court system, law enforcement system is all foreign to them. They may never have been in the court.
Tera Pita, Prosecutor, City Attorney's Office, St. Paul, Minnesota.
I think when people think of reporting violence, they automatically assume that that their loved one is going to be brought to jail. And they have to really think through, is that something that I want to have happen? In any case of domestic violence or any kind of violence, the victim just wants the abuse to end. They don't want to cut off their ties with their family. They don't necessarily even want to cut off the ties with their spouse. They just want the abuse to end. So that fear of losing their family, losing their spouse, losing the people they care about and their loved ones, I think really makes victims reluctant to both report and participate.
Kathy Church, Case Manager, Seattle Aging and Disability Services.
The seniors that I serve, what I have found, by and large, have a really difficult time acknowledging their loved one as a perpetrator. And that can be enormously frustrating, or at least a challenge for law enforcement, and even for myself sometimes. They don't want to point the finger at their grandson, who is the only, child they've ever, loved and who has been there for them through thick and thin. They don't want to blame them. And sometimes that's for a variety of reasons. One is just the complex relationship that they might have with that person. It might also be because that person is the only one that's able to go out and get them medications, to bring them food. It might be because that perpetrator is threatening to take away their wheelchair. They might be threatening to put them in a nursing home. So all of these behind the scenes threats or circumstances may not be things that the senior feels comfortable telling law enforcement, yet they're still there. And sometimes what I find is that through no fault of law enforcement, the client may feel more comfortable telling me, a social worker. Maybe I feel a little less intimidating, but they'll tell me, they'll say, Kathy, so-and-so, this person or this, grandson of mine is threatened to do this. And so I can sometimes work with them to help them understand that their abuser is not the only way to help them get what they need, that there are other resources out there that I can work to connect them with.
Evelyn Laureano, Executive Director, Neighborhood Self-Help by Older Persons Project, New York, New York.
Understanding the immigration status of the individual is very important. Was grandma brought to this country to babysit and outstayed her visa? And if she complains now, she's going to be sent home and deported to a community that she hasn't seen in 10 years, and there's no one there to support her. So understanding that is very important, so that her reluctance to speak up may have to do with her legal status in this country, because there may not be any options back home for that individual. Will the court, maybe she's the only one who has the legal status and the other 5 people in the home don't. So bringing the police in will jeopardize the daughter, the grandchildren, but it's really the stepson that's there as well. That's the problem. But now you're bringing the spotlight into that home, and that will also serve as a deterrent, a barrier to getting help through the criminal justice system. We have to understand what the history of the immigration process is for that individual. They may have had histories of being refugee where there's a mistrust of authorities, where the police is the last person that you would turn to in terms of getting help. So how does that history from their native country apply to what's happening here?
Risa Bregman, Director, New York City Elder Abuse Center, New York, New York.
Victims experience a range of emotional and practical problems. And so the emotional responses often are depression, anxiety, fear, shame, guilt. I mean, these are really distressing, debilitating emotions. And then what accompanies those emotions, or often what is creates those emotions, are often, thoughts and beliefs and inferences. Like, for example, when someone is feeling ashamed, they're often thinking things like, I can't let anyone know about this because what will they think of me? They're going to think much less of me, and I won't be able to tolerate that judgment. When someone's feeling guilty, they're often thinking things like, I did something wrong and I'm really no good for that, that for what I did. So they're carrying that sense of responsibility and no goodness that they're putting on themselves. If someone's depressed, they may be thinking of themselves as being worthless. And when people are feeling anxious, it's a lot of what ifs, that can be really paralyzing. What if I tell somebody and nobody believes me? What if I tell somebody and I end up in a nursing home? And so, what if this happens to me again and I die and no one's even going to know that I died here in my home? What's going to happen to my adult child if I do tell somebody? So there are all these emotions and thoughts that are occurring, and we need to address them in order to help the person move forward. And then in addition, there are practical problems. There are, safety issues. There are financial issues. There are health issues. There are just so many concerns that as practitioners, we really need to address.
Logos appear. NCALL, www.ncall.us. Terra Nova Films, terranova.org. Funded by the U.S. Department of Justice Elder Abuse Initiative and the Office on Violence Against Women, www.justice.gov/elderjustice.